Good day everyone. My name is Prince J.G. Jimena, together with my co-presenters Aratibay and J.L. San Jose. We are tasked to discuss the topic Urban Geography. So here are the objectives that we're expecting the students to know. First is to define the terms used to describe urban settlements. Next is to describe the dynamics of major urban problems. Next is to explain the processes of suburbanization and gentrification, and to identify the underlying causes of the spatial distribution of social groups in urban areas, to discuss the models of urban structure, and to compare and contrast U.S. cities and other cities around the world. I'm Prince J.G. Jimena and I'll be the first presenter to discuss the urban geography. To finally start the discussion, I prepared one question. What comes into your mind when you hear the word urbanization? That's right! When an increasing number of people convene in one area or settlement, we call this process urbanization. Typically, urbanization is accompanied by an expansion of the infrastructure, including services and other resources. From a global perspective, more developed countries are more urbanized than less developed countries. For you, why do you think MDCs are more urbanized than LDCs? What do you think is the reason? There are many factors why urbanization in LCDs is more difficult. One of it is the inefficient public services systems and limited resources like limited public health care and likes. Also dealing with homelessness and other issues. One factor contributing to the rapidly increasing urbanization rates in LCDs is continued high population growth, which contributes to urban growth in two ways. First, growing population in rural areas force many people to move to the cities in search for better opportunities. Second, the birth rates of people who move to the cities in LCDs are not dropping. So, the continued high birth rates can lead to the massive poverty that persists in the cities in LCDs. Rubenstein defines a city as an urban settlement that has been legally incorporated into an independent and self-governing unit. His definition is simple yet sufficient for our purposes. Keep in mind that every country has their own definition of a city. For example, here in the Philippines, when we hear the word city, the first thing comes in our minds are high buildings. How and why do cities grow? The first and most obvious process is known as rural to urban migration. People simply move to the city from rural areas to urban area. The second way that cities grow is through annexation. Annexation is a formal act whereby a state or area proclaims the territory or the surrounding areas and incorporate them. Annexation is done for two main reasons. The first reason is that annexation increases the tax base of the city. More people mean greater tax revenues. The second reason is that awards of state and federal funds are often given to the largest cities or those that seem to be most in need. When the urban area has a greater number of people or population, the funds that are needed should be greater. Next is the Metropolitan Statistical Area or MSA. An MSA must have a central city with a population of at least 50,000. The term central city refers to that area of urban space generally known as the city or the urban core. Because MSAs continue to expand spatially, they can sometimes merge with one or more other urban areas to form what is called a conurbation. Conurbation is an extended urban area typically consisting of several towns merging with other more cities. Metro Manila is the largest conurbation in the country, comprises of the city of Manila and 15 neighboring cities. In more extreme circumstances, several cities may overlap. Geographers refer to this urban phenomenon as a megalopolis. Megalopolis can sometimes called as a supercity or megaregion. A megalopolis can have a total population of about 10 million people. For example, is the Kolkata in India. Kolkata in India is the largest urban area to be considered a megalopolis. The next part of the topic urban geography will be discussed by my co-presenter Alan J. San Jose.
Thank you, Mr. Humana. Good day, everyone. I am Olenjiel Alsonse, and I will be discussing the four factors contributing to the problems in the U.S. cities, which are suburbanization, gentrification, race and ethnic unrest, and of course, post-industrial society's impact on urban areas. Okay, suburbanization. There are several valid explanations for the decline of inner cities in the United States. And in the 1950s, the US government initiated a program encouraging the development of suburban communities. For instance, soldiers returning home from a war receive a favorable loans to purchase homes outside of the crowded cities. And as more families demanded private backyards, two car garages, and other amenities not accessible in the city, this tendency accelerated. So, in simple words, suburbanization is when people move out of inner cities areas to the surrounding urban areas where the building density is less. The areas then become more built up and offer many services such as transport to the inner city. And once the people moved to the suburbs, industries soon followed. Industries in need of a large areas of land were lured to suburban communities by relatively inexpensive land prices. So with that, the movement of people and industry complemented one another. The flow of people to the suburbs continued to rise, eventually leaving behind old and deteriorating inner cities. So the range of changes that take place as people move out, the market towns, and the villages of the countryside around cities, these people change the countryside economically, socially, and the like. So when we say economic change, it happens when the tertiary sector changes because of the increasing influence of tourism and a decline in the number of services. So when it comes to social changes, when having fewer farmers and more professional middle classes, and of course more retired people. Therefore, rural gentrification and so a rise in rural house prices. So what is gentrification? Some people believe that gentrification is the less gaps of dying cities. Gentrification is the process of rehabilitating old urban housing. Meaning, gentrification is bringing some individuals back to the inner city. But it has not yet resulted in a significant demographic shift in most cities. This factor has effects in which can bring the commercial and economic development of a given area as more businesses relocate and as more infrastructures get built. So this gives more work opportunities for people both inside and outside of the key cities. And accessibility is another effect brought about by gentrification as public transportation options increase and the travel time to the leisure activities like shopping and dining is decreased. Moving on, there are two important factors that have made gentrification possible. The first one is rundown properties can be purchased relatively cheaply and upgraded to luxury, or at least middle classes residential units which are very profitable investments. However, the disadvantage is that many low-income residents are being displaced and forced to seek alternative low-income accommodations. The second factor is for contributing to increased gentrification is demographic. So many young couples are marrying later, earning two good incomes, and waiting longer to have children. So these people are likely to enjoy the amenities of inner cities such as the theater and a wide variety of restaurants. So in a sense, these people are discovered in the city and has a contribution to the revitalization of decaying neighborhoods. Let's proceed toward the third factor, the racial and ethnic unrest. Many urban areas are bombarded with racial and ethnic unrest. You may remember the incidents surrounding the Rodney King trial in Los Angeles, and prior to these events, riots in Watts and Detroit as well as the other places occurred. So with that, these incidents created a negative picture of American cities and demonstrated the disadvantage of integrating huge numbers of individuals from various ethnic, racial, and socioeconomic backgrounds. And according to some reports, the United States stands out among 17 advanced economies as one of the most complicated when it comes to questions of social unity. A large majority of Americans say that there are strong political and strong racial and ethnic conflict with the US, and that most of people disagree on basic facts. So why does race unrest happen in the US cities? The first reason is such violence has happened many times before. Urban race riots in the US happened when civil society showed disregard for black life and people had no faith in their justice system. Second, history matters a great deal in understanding why urban racial violence occurs, when it happens, and why it happens. So, changing economic and social dynamics often have implications for urban populations. The city is the constant motion as people position themselves to maximize their utility in the urban system. Meaning, some urban people strive for the most affordable housing while others choose calm residential streets, proximity to the local or hotspots, and proximity to racial and or ethnic familiarity. These processes are not always in sync. Some urban residents believe that when individuals of different races or ethnic groups join their area, it is fundamentally transformed and they react to this activity. In other words, once a community hits a tipping point, there will be a reaction. Another reason why race and ethnic conflict happens in the US, it's because according to some estimates, once a largely white neighborhood's African American population exceeds at 40%, whites will begin to leave. An additional study shows that when the ratio of Caucasians in the community approaches 50%, Black Americans will leave. Okay, let's move on for the last factor, the post-industrial society's impact on urban areas. We all know that the post-industrial society is a stage in a society's development during which the economy transitions from one of the primary provides good and one that primarily provides services. However, the post-industrial economic transformation occurring in most cities has also had a severe impact on urban residents, and most noticeably is cities have lost a significant number of jobs, many of which were relatively high-paying and did not require advanced education. The loss of high-paying jobs has forced many urban residents to take the low-skills, low-paying jobs in the service sector. Individuals find it difficult to maintain themselves, much alone their families, due to the low income given in these positions. The rise in homelessness is an even more significant issue. This factor contributes to the problem in the US because the service sector made up people such as nurses, teachers, researchers, social workers, and lawyers, among others, accounts for more of the economic growth and wealth than the manufacturing sector, which is made of people such as construction workers, textile mill workers, food manufacturers, and production workers. So, the economic transformation associated with a post-industrial society subsequently transforms society as a whole. Rubenstein's give estimate of the number of homeless people in various cities around the world. Regardless of the accuracy of these figures, the numbers are increasing everywhere. This is a clear depiction that as cities grow, so does the number of homeless. Homeless is caused by a scarcity of affordable housing, privatization of civic services, speculation in housing investment, and slow and fast urbanization, as well as poverty, unemployment, and family dysfunction. Due to these problems, inner cities residents have been referred to as a permanent underclass. With that, who gave the concept of underclass? An American sociologist, Charles Murray, first coined the term the underclass, which refers to the group of people in America who were long-term unemployed and effectively welfare dependent. So the concept of underclass is related to a cycle of economic and social problems. As jobs leave the inner city, the tax base declines. With fewer tax revenues, the city cannot provide as many social services such as housing and education. With this problem, students obtain an inadequate education as a result of fewer schools, leaving them with fewer work skills. With less technical abilities, they can only find low paying positions in the service industry. Low paying employment results in lesser tax revenues, leads to underfunded schools, and the cycle continues to rise. So this cycle has resulted in high unemployment, drug and alcohol addiction, illiteracy, and crime rates. Here now, Ms. Tibay, the next reporter, to discuss the urban models. Thank you.
So thank you for that wonderful presentation and discussion, Mr. San Jose. So before I continue the discussion, allow me to introduce myself first. So my name is Ara Prashel Estibay, and I will introduce to you the several models pertaining to urban areas. Start with concentric model, one of the most influential model. So this model was developed and first tested in Chicago in the 1920s and has since been very influential in our understanding of the socio-spatial evolution of urban areas. One of the model's major criticisms is that it does not account for ethnic or familial ties, which are very persuasive factors in a person's decision to move or not to move. Additionally, the concentric zone model suggests that urban areas consist of 5 zones based on residential choices or constraints. The 5 zones are as follows. First is the central business district. Second is the zone of transition. Third is the zone of independent workers' homes. And the fourth one is the zone of better residences. And the last one is the commuters' zone. So, as what I have said, the first zone is the Central Business District, which contains a commercial and business services and is often called the downtown section of a city. The next zone is called the Zone of Transition, which contains industry and poor quality housing. Immigrants and single individuals tend to live in the area, frequently subdividing larger houses into apartments. Most people in the area rent instead of owning it themselves. The third zone is called the Zone of Independent Workers' Homes, which is composed of modest older houses occupied by working-class families in which a large percentage of the families rent but somehow own their own houses. The fourth zone is the Zone of Better Residences, which contains the newer and more spacious housing, and this zone is inhabited by the middle class and the houses are most owned and not rented. And the last zone is called the Commuters Zone, which is located the furthest away from the city. This area is mostly upper class residents with very few middle class residents. So this model or idea contends that as people or families achieve better economic status, they eventually emigrate from the central region to more expensive residential zones. And now let's move on to the next slide, the second model. The sector model, derived from the concentric zone model in the 1930s, claims that cities develop in a series of sectors, not rings. In this model, certain activities are attracted to certain areas of a city and then developed outward in a wedge from the center. Often a transportation corridor influences how these wedges or sectors develop outward. Industry and retailing develop along the transportation corridor, while high-class residential areas take over the most attractive areas of the city. Middle-class and lower-class residential areas fill in less attractive areas, all of which create wedges that go outward from the center of the city. Additionally, this sector model has 5 sections: the CPD industry, low-class residential, middle-class residential, and high-class residential. In the industry section, it is mostly factories and the main public transportation routes that go through the CBD. The low-class residential is next to the transportation and industry section and contains low-income housing. That's why people live there to reduce transportation costs and to help them get closer to the work. So the middle-class residential section surrounds the other sectors but is further away from the transportation zone, making it more desirable. So the last one is the high-class residential. It is the outermost edge and farthest away from the industry zone. It contains the best housing. It also has the least traffic. So let's proceed to the next model. So multiple nuclei model, which claims that cities develop around many nodes or centers of activity. In this model, industrial areas, educational areas, retailing areas, and business areas, to name a few, each attract different services and residential classes that cluster together into multiple centers of activities. However, this model seeks to depart from the concentric zone model and assumes that resources are distributed equally and there is equal transportation costs. The rise of suburbanization from the 1950s onward influenced the creation of the peripheral model for U.S. cities. So this peripheral model has a central city surrounded by suburban residential and business areas tied together with a beltway or ring road. Edge cities develop in the suburban areas where businesses, shopping malls, and manufacturing areas spring up. So at first, edge cities serve the suburban residents who work in the central city, but eventually they take on a life on their own. All of the models seem to have elements that represent many urban areas, while none is perfect. These models are still very useful to geographers and other people who are interested in urban phenomena. Even so, many of these models are not transferable to other urban areas, particularly international urban areas. So let's proceed to the next slide. The urban models outside of the United States. European cities have developed almost exactly opposite the way US cities have. Because the history of these cities far predates the use of cars, the central part of European cities consists of narrow winding streets lined with the best shops, cafes, and cultural activities. So the wealthy typically reside in the city's densely populated center. The poor, on the other hand, reside in public housing developments in the suburbs where they most travel great distances to work and to where there are significant issues with crime, unemployment, and inadequate social services. As you can see, this is the exact opposite of how American cities are modeled. So for those who are not familiar with the word inadequate, you can take note of this. So when we say inadequate, meaning lacking the quality or quantity required. Less developed countries also have different urban structures. Because these urban areas are quite diverse, we cannot easily generalize them. Cities that were the result of European colonial practices exhibit a similar structure to European cities. The wealthy tend to live toward the city center and in a wedge outward from there. The poor are concentrated in the outer rings of the city. So when we say squatter settlements, it consists of people who have moved to the city, constructing their own dwellings and attempting to provide their own services, which is quite difficult. Thank you for listening, and we really appreciated your patience as we discussed this. So as you can see, these are the 3 questions that we created in order to gauge whether or not you actually learned anything from our discussion. You can post your answer in the comment section down below.